and I'll
There
pass
we
it over
go.
to Michael.
Cool. Well, thanks, Allison, for the invite today. I think I've met most of the people on call, but I think there's a couple names I didn't recognize. Like Allison had mentioned, my name is Michael. I'm a fourth generation settler that was born on Treaty 6 and homeland of the Métis in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. But I've been living in Saskatoon for just about 10 years now, and I'm a program evaluator. So I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of organizations here in Saskatchewan to help improve programming as much as possible through evidence-based decisions and using research methodologies that we'd all been all familiar with here. So I was asked to give a quick update on the overview or give an overview of the midterm evaluation that was just recently completed, like Allison had mentioned in November. So what I'm going to present today is really going to be short. It certainly doesn't contain all the results. If you want to see the whole suite of results, which I would really strongly encourage you do, um, like I said, Allison was going to put the report online, so I would go there. But also, we can answer any questions after the fact too. You're more than welcome to reach out to me or Allison, as we both have lots of knowledge on this report. So like I said, it's going to be a really quick overview of what we did and what we found. And not to bury the lead too much, it was quite a positive report. A lot of students found a lot of value in the mentorship network, and sort of all started to demonstrate that with some beautiful quotes as well as some themes that popped out. So Allison went over this already, but again, this evaluation was completed in the summer of 2020 with a final report actually being handed in on November 6th and sort of over to Allison, and we discussed that over. Um, we used a couple different methods of collecting data to establish some triangulation between methods here. So you may have probably filled out surveys in the past in result of going to network events. And so we pulled data from 4 of those meant for specific feedback, but also to gather evidence of outcomes over time for the last couple of years. So we have that, which I'll present on the next slide from outcomes. We use database analysis. So this is basically, Allison keeping track of internal statistics such as growth on social media, funding given to students, and really just anything output based that Allison had been keeping track of. We took a look at and sort of see how that compared and contrasted with other methods. And just to give you a bit of an example of what I mean here, this is the growth in social media that Allison sort of kept track of, and we presented in the evaluation report, sort of showing the reach has grown over the past couple of years in both Facebook and mailing lists quite significantly. We also, though, most importantly, did interviews with students. So like as Allison said, we got quite delayed on this, so it was, poor timing in terms of the school year was just starting and that sort of idea, but we did end up getting 13 students talk with us, and it was a really fulfilling experience. So these were your past and current network participants. People have gone to events, people are going to writing retreats and sort of on committees, and they were really great. So again, if you're on the line and contributed to this, I thank you again. It was wonderful to chat with you about the network. But each participant received $50 to help compensate for their time, and the average interview lasted about 32 minutes. So as you can see by this giant bar chart, the represented in the green and purple bars, this is the 4 surveys I was talking about after events, and you could see that almost all the participants either agreed or strongly agreed that these 6 outcomes that we had planned for at the beginning of the network were being achieved. So again, just as an example, across 76 total participants that had answered the surveys across 4 events, 100% of them said that their event had a supportive and welcoming environment. And that is, agree or strongly agree at the very top here. But overall, most of the outcomes, with the exception of perhaps the last one, though I wouldn't make the argument that it wasn't necessarily a negative finding, were positive, and that's good news for the network in terms of just overall feedback from the last couple of years that the events that they're hosting are facilitating key outcomes that we anticipated at the beginning of the planning of the network a couple of years ago. And again, this is dived into much more deeply into the report, so I encourage you to look there or contact me afterwards, and I can answer any questions about this. But perhaps, again, most importantly, was diving into the interview findings, which is the bulk of the report that formed sort of evidence that backed up or supported that quantitative evidence that I just discussed. So the first sort of theme that came out of students' interviews was this sense of increased confidence and independence. So in interviews, students really discussed how um, activities put on by the network positively influence their confidence in conducting Indigenous framed research, as well as their own personal confidence just in being a general student, a graduate student generally, those research skills. And the students really attributed this positively to the support and inclusivity of the network and explained that it really helped them to realize their potential as individual researchers, but also as Indigenous peoples, and which will come through a little bit stronger a bit later. So it increased confidence and independence. And it was also a source of motivation for a lot of students we talked to in interviews, really basically saying that the fact that it's such a relational network and that we all meet together and we do things together like the writing retreat was really a strong source of motivation to keep going as in graduate school, to keep going on individual projects and really to whether that be small goals such as writing a paper or large goals such as writing a thesis, to keep going. And you can sort of see, I won't read these quotes, but you can, I'm sure you've read it by now. Lots of quotes to back this up. That was really powerful. Allison alluded to this a little bit earlier, but then one of the network's main activities is providing financial support for students. And since 2018, financial support has been given to 45 Indigenous students with a total of $208,000 being, awarded or given out. And this is a significant amount of money, of course. And we found in interviews that students were really attributing this financial support to a willingness to continue on with their degree, and really not necessarily a willingness, but an ability to continue on. And this was really, again, these interviews were done during the pandemic, obviously. So students said that this financial support not only helped students focus on their research, but it also made it so they didn't necessarily have to seek additional employment. And especially during COVID times where employment was, uncertain, this sort of stability in financials that the network were able to provide really helped them out, as demonstrated by that quote below. Just at that bold part there, that a huge difference to me and my family in terms of our daily lives. And so again, you can probably imagine the effect that has on a graduate student who is trying to, write a master's thesis or a PhD dissertation. The fact that they don't have to worry necessarily about one element of, a life for a little while really helps them to continue on and is a source of motivating factor and really tells them that they can do it. So that's a really awesome finding out of this report. Of course, there was lots of talk around professional development and career clarity from students. So just as one really quick one, lots of students in the network described that the network activities facilitated academic skill development. And this was wide ranging from how to write a paper, how to write a CV, all the way to networking, those sorts of ideas. So it was attributed to being able to develop skills as an academic and as a professional as well. But perhaps a more interesting one is this idea of a validation, or almost like an anti-imposter syndrome that the network is able to facilitate. So interviewees really described, that hearing other Indigenous people's struggles and experiences with imposter syndrome really validated that they weren't alone and instilled the belief that they too belonged in academics. So it's this idea that through networks and through those sort of social events that the network were hosting, that these students were able to hear about the struggles of, the people they respected and the, Indigenous professors that were there, or the mentors that they came along with, and basically said that, prior to taking part of the network, a lot of these interviewees or these students felt like they didn't belong in the university setting. But or maybe that they were the only ones struggling with daily tasks or bigger tasks in academia, but that this changed once they interacted with the mentors in the network, which again was a really awesome finding to see happen here, because that just again promotes a willingness to continue. And maybe I'll skip over this quote, but really that bolded part is what I really wanted to point to. The network is really able to ground me, and I always felt reminded that I do belong here and that is my role to play, talking about and being an Indigenous scholar. And Allison does have these slides too, so we'll make sure to send them along so you can have a chance to read all these cool quotes. Another key finding out of the interviews was a sense of cultural grounding and comfort. So interviews really described that the network activities and sort of just being generally involved with the people involved in the network really was a source of cultural grounding and knowledge that they believed was sort of missing in their lives at the university environment before interacting with the network, which again is a really encouraging sign. In terms of comfort and cultural self-identity, one really interesting theme that emerged out of this was that having access to a network of Indigenous individuals that shared similar experiences, like I was talking about before, was really a contributing factor, not only feeling comfortable at the university, but also feeling comfortable who they are as a person, which is a really awesome, again, positive finding that is going to contribute to continuing graduate studies. Um, and perhaps I'll read this quote on the right just because I think it's particularly powerful. This particular individual was talking about an event that they attended. It was really, it was a moment where I had felt comfortable and then I just noticed. It was actually the writing group when I was participating and I went, oh, I was so comfortable. And then I was thinking, oh, wow, I'm so comfortable. And then I was like, wow, how long have I been comfortable just entering a space with this identity? I couldn't know, but that was the moment where I knew. I just walked in and I said it. I didn't worry or flinch or concerned about others' reactions because I've actually had negative encounters with people around before it. And the student went on to experience how this sort of this network that's being facilitated, or this environment that's being facilitated by the network, enabled this, which is again really positive finding. Moving on, network and career connections was another finding that as you probably guessed, was positively viewed by students, as well as a sense of belonging and valued relationships. So again, students often described feeling lonely or isolated when navigating through a post-secondary institution, but after joining the network, they sort of saw connections between students, faculty, and new investigators, and sort of felt a sense of belonging to a group on campus, which really helped them to feel like they belong and they were competent and sort of able to continue. And of course, my last slide, I really quickly go through this. Really what this really boiled down to for students was that they saw the mentorship network as, it being actualized in a university setting. So seeing mentorship the way they described it and the way they wanted it to happen, actually happening through the network. And again, this was in their interactions, but also in the opportunities for professional experiences that students would otherwise not be able to attain, that they said. And it really aligned well, the network that is, aligned well with their students' expectations of an ideal mentor-mentee relationship and what they valued in a good mentor. And again, that's, not necessarily a top-down relationship, but having both parties contribute to that mentoring relationship. So again, I only had 10 minutes to talk, so that's it for me.